Alright, welcome back, guys. It is Colin with the Sunpire CCG, again joined by my co-host Trevor. And as you can tell from the title, today we are doing a bit of a guide on Enel, everyone's favorite yellow deck of the format. Well, quite frankly, it's the only good yellow deck of the format. Sorry, category players.
Well, BY Luffy, right? I mean, that is it's a 42 card deck of yellow cards and then eight black.
It's a yellow deck that doesn't really function like the other yellow decks, I guess.
Dude, when you trigger those events, though, man, you're right. But yeah.
So many triggers. But all right. So like the thing is that unlike other archetypes like Katakuri, Enel actually has, in my opinion, quite a few angles of play to where like people like to be dismissive of the playstyle just because it's, it's a yellow deck. There's a bunch of triggers. You get beiged or you're the one who should disappear, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, so skillful. But actually, there's a lot of things going on with the deck. And I think not enough people give that credit. So, why play Enel? So, Trevor, I'm going to rag on you for a bit. So, literally like less than a couple of weeks ago, we did our tier list video. And we talked about how Enel was in the A tier, and you said, yeah, this is a good deck, but man, I hate this deck. I'm never going to play it.
I hate Enel. I'm never going to play Enel for a tournament. Yeah.
And now you're the one that's almost been exclusively playtesting that deck the past couple of weeks. What happened? Hey, Trevor, how's it going? Wait, whoa, what's that? What's that?
No, don't look, please. No.
What's this, bro? What's this? What's that?
Don't look, please. Okay, so you really put me on the hot seat here. All right, so let me preface this with, first off, guys, I didn't want to be here, okay? The game has led me astray. My red decks aren't good anymore. Whitebeard, look, I'm putting this out there now. I said it in the tier list video, I believe. There's going to be somebody who tops with Whitebeard. I'm not going to deny that. I don't care to try though, because it's just too much effort. It really is. So I'm gonna put effort into a deck that I believe is comfortable for me. And unfortunately, that just has to be this deck. It just happens to be this deck. And there's for a few good reasons. Two big ones. It has the same knowledge check. Not the same knowledge check, but there is a knowledge check when coming up in playing Enel into most players. And that knowledge check can get a lot of players. I don't care how skilled you are, you can sometimes forget, and it just happens. The other thing is I love playing big bodies and hitting people. It's a shitty reason, but it's my reason, and that's Enel. It facilitates two things that I love, is knowledge checking a lot of players and then playing the biggest body that I can possibly play. In this format, the biggest, most sticky body that I can see is Ace. Two biggest reasons for me, at least. There are other reasons to play Enel, and clearly you guys can see on the slide here. It's kind of two things that I stated was knowledge check and the high power top end. There's also the line of plays that you can see throughout the game. Like as you're holding your hands out and you've got these like sometimes 11 to 12 card hands, you have lines of play. Like there are 10-Dom plays that don't facilitate you playing a big body. Recently into like law players and Lucci players, it's like just double Gadatsu. If that's a board-breaking play, it causes them to have a ton of resources to remove bodies that then lets you start playing other... And that's simple, by the way. I understand that that's simple compared to, like, Law, Sakas that you guys used to play, and Lucci's. But there are different things. There are different ways to play the deck, but they're simple. Not to keep jumping back and forth on the same discussion there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. So it's one of those things where, like we said previously, and I'm sure plenty of other top personalities in this space have said that most of the other decks, if not all of the other decks in the metagame, have some kind of game plan of beating Enel. But why do we still consider it an A tier? It does have very strong cards like Yamato, Katakuri, 10-drop Ace. These are all like very high impact cards that you just get to play for, little to no drawback because of your hero power being able to like keep you alive for so long. Like you just get to play, like the average card in your deck is just generally higher quality than the average card in your opponent's deck, which that's a very strong thing. It's very similar to a Whitebeard back in set 2, 3, and 4. Like even though there's a way of beating Whitebeard, it's just the cards in your deck are so high quality that you'll just, you'll win a lot of the games that way anyway. And unlike Whitebeard, it's a very flexible game plan too. Like you have the Starve strat and you have the more like aggressive / mid-rangey strat, and depending on your build, you can even flip-flop depending on the matchup.
Yeah. That was something that I wanted to bring up too, is like so first off, Colin's gonna always be able to articulate this better. I'm not that guy. I played Whitebeard for 4 sets. My brain is shut off, and it's been shut off. It's always gonna be shut off. But I will state that the starve strategy in this meta is super strong. The only deck that can technically counter the starve strategy is Black Yellow Luffy, but Black Yellow Luffy, as soon as it draws that final life, is on a timer. Choking out your opponent in this meta is super valuable now. I think the only deck that you can't choke is Moria in terms of the top decks that we put in that tier list. And that's just due to the fact that they can run at you with Coronas, with their leader ability, hogbacks constantly, and it's too much. It's too wide of a board and too much advantage that they can use, always being able to just pull a body out of life or out of the graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. And so getting into what the typical deck list will look like. So here's an example. You have 4 of every BS trigger, the Beige, Onami, You're the One Who Should Disappear, Shirahoshi, the new Frankie from OP7, which that card's like insane. It's just a strictly better Satori, which makes no sense to me why they would print that card. And then you have 4 of every good top end.
Yeah. Raigo is the hilarious card of the deck. I think that card is... Why did they print a card that just says, just pop a body? That's all it says. Just pop a body. Get rid of a Isha that they just played. And there's little to no drawback because of the next card that I want to go over here in tandem with this card is Flampe. Flampe has saved my life so many times. We've tested a lot, and some games against like black decks as an Enel player, for me, it's like if they stick an Isha, you lost. That's how it feels. Everybody's controllable now, like nothing sticks. I have panicked played 2 Flampes and panic drawn a Raigo, and that works. It just works sometimes. Not to say to do it every time, but it's something that I want to make sure is known. Those 2 cards in tandem, for some reason, always help. Don't be afraid to do it at least once in your life. But in all seriousness, though, Raigo is important. Isho cannot stick into you. Opposing Enel players, I have limited time on the deck, but how I've been playing the Enel mirror is let your opponent play the first high end, and I'm talking Yamato and specifically Yamato and Ace, and then just Raigo it. Don't try to establish a bodies while they're playing their bodies. Just Raigo them, get them off the board, and then that's how I've been winning those matchups. You Raigo it, play a body, Raigo the next body, play a body. Try to keep that momentum up, or if you can't, just Raigo, if you can. Like, that's kind of the best way to do it, is just it's controlling those bodies and making sure that they have less resources, because we're gonna see it as like some people are not gonna be on the 5-drop Shirahoshi, so like the high end that's in their hand is more likely the high end that they're gonna have for that most of that game. So if you can control that high end as effective as possible, do it with the best of your ability. I think the next thing we do want to go over though is the cards that we're teching in for specific matchups. Your hardest matchups are going to be the control matchups like Rob Lucci and Black Yellow Luffy. Those decks for Black Yellow Luffy, not because of control, but because of the consistency that it has of playing effective bodies. 5-drop Luffy is annoying. 8-drop Moria to play double 5-drop Luffy is a thing. If you didn't kill them enough or hurt them enough, they can kind of do that pretty easily. The other thing is like 5-drop Luffy with Sabo off the Moria. That is still effective enough to be an annoying board to deal with. You need cards to help with that. And the 2 cards that I found to be the best so far is the 2-drop blocker Shirahoshi and the 5-drop Sabo. Mostly because you're never going to be able to Gadatsu anybody in the BY Luffy matchup. And Rocket Luffy is needed for the Law matchup, but is absolutely useless in the BY Luffy matchup in terms of its effect. So you need the 5-drop Sabo to answer it. It's a 2 of right now. If you can find room for it and it feels comfortable, do it. If you want to run more of it, it's hard to fit those pieces in though. But 5-drop Sabo is helpful in that matchup because as soon as they play their 5-drop Luffy, just try to Sabo it. And we'll go over this a little bit as like, in that matchup, it's okay to play Flampes in the early game to facilitate you Raigoing the first Luffy. From what we have found, that seems pretty effective. It's cutting off that life control from them, or like ripping life mechanic from them, is the best way to beat them. It slows their resource management. You get to play big bodies while they're still struggling to get their life down. And you're forcing them to use other cards to do that. More cards out of their hand, I should say. I've been rambling. Colin, do you have anything, please?
No, I was going to say, on top of all that, is just like an AK body off the board that you don't have to deal with once Black Yellow Luffy starts playing Sabos down your throat.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I kind of like this list more over the previous list that we showed, in the sense that the Shirahoshi blocker is like really, really freaking good in this metagame currently. Against every matchup aside from the blue matchups, and aside from Reparable Law, that can bottom deck it, obviously, it's just
Yeah.
a guaranteed block, like against the black decks.
Yep.
And the mirror match as well. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. And at worst comes to worst against RP Law, it's just 1K counter, so it's not the end of the world.
I mean, that's the reason you can play it safely, right? Is it's not an extra brick in the deck. It's a 1K counter. I think other than that, the deck's self-explanatory. It is just a 50-card pile list. It has the same game plan for the most part every game. Starve your opponent, except for in specific matchups and situations, which we will go over later.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple other tech cards you could play. Like, some people play a 6-cost AK vanilla, like the Momonosuke or the Parasparrow if you're poor. I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, well, and we were trying it too, because it's not necessarily a 6-drop 8K, but we were trying the Edward Newgate. That might be something that you
the
could
6/7,
try.
yeah.
Yeah, because it still takes the same amount of cards out of Law to reduce the cost, because that's why you're playing it, right? Not just that, but it's a body that has a good amount of cost where it's annoying to deal with for the black decks, and it's power for Law to have to deal with, which is annoying. 2 cards out of their hand at minimum. That card's funny though, because some decks will try to starve you, so then you can play the Edward Newgate, heal to 5, check all that life, and be like, oh, this is what I have here. 0-cost event at bottom, Onami here, or beige here, Onami here, big body here, so when they first swing I can just collect a big body. And that's important. Something to try. We tried it a little bit. I want to try it more. Those are 3 good ones. I don't know if there's... Unfortunately, I don't know the yellow card pool. I don't play yellow, guys. This is the first time I've really branched myself into yellow, so I don't know of any more tech cards. You could play Hiyori in the deck, other than, like, you could play a 16-card 2K deck, or 16 2Ks over, like, the Sabo and the Shirahoshi in this list, and facilitate more of, like, a control game of playing the Shirahoshi in the early game to set a 0-cost event, or in the late game, put a 0-cost event at the bottom of your life, and then heal it with Katakuri. This is all on 10 Dawn, by the way. That is something that you can do.
The honest truth is that, like, about 40 to 44 of these cards are already, like, pretty locked in.
Yeah.
Like we said, you gotta run 4 of each of the 2Ks that we have on the screen already. You gotta run the 4 Katakuris, gotta run the 4 Yamatos, gotta run the 4 Aces. So if you want to mess around the deck, it's primarily between 4 to 6 slots, I would say.
Yeah,
and it really just comes down to, like, there's only like a couple of matchups that you might have to think about in a tournament of, like, all right, what would I rather lose to? Would I rather lose to this, or would I rather lose to, like, this other matchup? But yeah.
No, full-heartedly agree. I think moving forward here, we discussed it a little bit over the talking about the decks, but the matchups that I feel personally that you're strongest against are Bonnie. That is your clear, like, just Katakuri the high end and laugh at them. They can't deal with all of your bodies. And then rogue decks. Enel is the Whitebeard of the meta, not when Whitebeard was at its peak, but, like, if you couldn't beat Whitebeard, you could not breach the top meta. That's how that worked, right? Like, if you couldn't beat this deck, that's it. And that's how Enel feels. Not many rogue decks can beat Enel. There are ways around it, I get it, but they're niche, very niche, and it's not good enough to over a 9-round tournament to bring into the event, for the fact that you could run into multiple Enels because it's a popular deck. Do you have anything else on that, Colin? I don't think there's much else to talk about. The best matchups for this deck are limited at best.
I would say that's about it. Again, like we said before, the matchup spread is like a very, like, flat line across the board for the most part. Because, quite frankly, the best decks in the format are the ones that can deal with big bodies, and now it's like the best deck at spamming big bodies. So usually the rogue decks can't deal with that. That's kind of the thing.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah.
Worst matchups, I discussed it already. It's like, it feels like Rob Lucci and Black Yellow Luffy, mostly because Sabo exists. Rob Lucci has, like, the consistency of being able to play, like, 1 to 2 Morias, and then going, like, Rebecca Sabo chaining. That's very hard to deal with. The best way I've found to deal with it is just find 7-drop Enel. It's the tip for that matchup, is find 7-drop Enel and just pray. The other option is you could hard starve them. Hard starving, though, is very scary because of cards like Gecko and Rebecca existing, but that's the 2 ways that I found to play into the matchup. You're not going to do well trying to do a mix of both. It's either, like, have Rush Enel and keep hitting them, or it's just hard starve. That's the 2 options for me so far, limited testing that I have. Black Yellow Luffy, as the Enel player, it's hard to say why it's bad, other than just the fact that that Luffy. It feels like it's just that Luffy. It just does too much. It turns out when a card becomes you play it for 2, you become a 7k leader that we can't swing into you early. We can't just like check you, right? We can't check you for a card that easily. It becomes an 8k. It draws you a card. What are we doing here? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, I feel like it depends on who you talk to, because like for me personally, I think I would put Black and Luffy more as a 50-50 matchup.
Yeah.
Kind of harkening back to our Black Yellow Luffy guide that I did with Muhammad a week ago, where I think maybe Luffy's favored as like somewhere between 51 and 55%.
Yeah.
Which isn't by a lot, to be honest with you. Because I personally think both decks have ways of beating each other. Like for you as Enel, you have your best tool is like the 8-drop category. Because if I'm not careful as the Luffy player, you might stuff my Mori into life while I'm at 0. And then if I don't have any self-awakeners, like I don't have the 5-drop Luffy on the field, then I'm just stuck.
Yeah.
And that's like the death knell. But obviously, like as Black Yellow Luffy, I have all the tools that you just talked about between Sabos and 5-drop Luffy to keep like unlocking my life. So yeah, it's an interesting matchup for sure.
No, like it's the one that I enjoy playing the most. As of right now, this is the most fun matchup to have, because it's like there's a clear victor of this matchup by like the 6th or 7th turn. It feels like it's when I go like as the Enel player, I look across the board and I see the Luffy player still has like 8 cards in hand and they have like 3 to 4 bodies on board. I'm like, yeah, they've probably won this game. There's no way for me to deal with this probably. And that's because that's the scariest thing, is just how consistent they are about getting those bodies on the ground. That's the only reason I think it's a worse matchup. I don't disagree. I can't say that you're fully wrong on the 50-50 either, because there are a lot of games that I'm taking as the Enel player. But it feels like I have to see specific cards. You don't necessarily have to, because you have like the Gecko, Aces, Sabo. You have 4 options in the deck that feel like they're good into the matchup.
Yeah, so like I guess just to preface this too, when we say worse matchups, again, like I said, Enel's matchup spread is like a very flat line.
Yep.
So when I say worst matchup, it's like probably like at worst it's like Lucci's with like maybe somewhere between 55 to 60% in Lucci's favor.
Yeah.
Like I don't think Enel really has like a 90-10 like matchup.
No.
Yeah.
No.
He doesn't have like a cursed matchup, so to speak. Like, you know, like how Luffy, his like absolute cursed matchup is Bonnie. Like, just basically can never be Bonnie if they're playing it right. Yeah. But with Enel, I think he has a way of like beating every leader, just on the same token as like every other leader has a way of beating him too. So
I guess I probably should have like headed this slide with like these are the matchups, if you pick this deck up today, are going to be the hardest to play into. That's probably the best way to phrase that.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's discuss the 50-50s. In terms of the top meta. We bring these 5 decks up. By the way, the ones that we have like pictures for and stuff is because these are the meta. For us, this is the meta. These 2 decks feel really they're 50-50 for sure. Law can just high roll you and you can't do anything about it. Just go next, right? Go next. It can happen. But you can definitely control and starve Law. I want to make that clear. Rocket Luffy, Gadatsu, and if you're playing it, 5-drop Sabo does a very effective thing. 5-drop Sabo is, I'm rambling, I'm sorry here, but 5-drop Sabo is another reason I wanted to play the deck. That card was because of Law. 5-drop Kid does way too much for that deck. It turns out when that leader ability is 2 Dawn only, and they're playing a full-sized 4-drop 5k onto the board, it's too effective. It's too good, that's why the deck's broken. So the best ways to be able to stop that are Raigo, Gadatsu, Sabo, and Rocket Luffy. Even Katakuri and Yamato, but you gotta survive to get there. I'm bringing those 2 up as the end because you've gotta survive to get there, because they can kill you before you get there. They have a chance.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing about Law, like within the entirety of the metagame, is that he's just the 50-50 against everybody, because it's just kind of the coin flip. How well does Law draw against you? How hard does he high roll? Does he see all his rage use and Captain Kids? It's like, well, if he has it, he has it. That's kind of one of those unfortunate aspects of the meta, in my opinion, but that's why a lot of people think that Law's the best deck, is that he just has that ability to high roll anybody.
No, I don't disagree. Moria I'll be blunt with you guys. We haven't tested this matchup. Well, 100% honestly, we haven't tested this matchup. And I think that's what you guys would want, right? Like, I don't want to come into this and be like, we're bringing our game knowledge to a lot of this. I want to make sure that that's clear for me, is like, the knowledge that I bring to this game is based on the game knowledge that I have, not personally like direct information. This feels like a 50-50 because you're playing the race. You've got to hit the Moria because you can't starve the Moria. But if the Moria does do well, and it's like we got Rebecca, Sabos, chaining, it's got Perona. Perona's an annoying card. It's very much an annoying card for us because we're always above 6 cards. It's very hard for us to be below 6 cards because if you're playing the leader to counter, then why are you playing Enel? You don't counter an Enel. And maybe that's how you play the matchup. And I'm not saying you should, because Perona's not that strong, but it's an annoying card. Also, because of the leader, you can never fully starve Moria. Moria is always able to grab back Moria, so it's like, you just don't try to starve them. There's no point. Just play the game of hitting them and see what happens.
But again, from the Moria's perspective, like, I've played this matchup quite a bit in the previous format before set 7, and even with having Eruption, it was a pretty tedious matchup to play where I'm like, okay, I have to establish my board. Oh, he drew in Yamato. Okay, I have to kind of like set up again. It's like, okay. Oh, he found his next Yamato. It's like, okay, I have to like keep making sure the board's clean so I don't accidentally die on the crackback. Whereas now, I think Enel has like a stronger fighting chance. Like, where people before would say that Moria was favored, but I think now it might actually be slightly Enel favored just because the addition of Ace and Frankie as an additional like BS body that comes out of life probably makes it a lot harder for Moria.
Also, the loss of Eruption. Maybe this is not a 50-50. Guys, this might not be 50-50. We'll post on Twitter if this turns out to not be a 50-50.
Somebody play Moria in an event first. Like, we just haven't seen it. So
yeah, that's the other thing. Is someone in the comments, please let us know if you've tested this and you understand if it's not a 50-50. Because it has the same sort of card pool as Rob Lucci to make it an annoying matchup for the Enel player. But Colin is right. It's lost Colin brought up some good points there, but it's also lost Eruption, and that's something that's huge again for like that deck. Rob Lucci's able to use Tempest Kick really well. This deck isn't, so yeah. I would love to see some comments on that though, because I just don't know. General tips: mulligan for high end. You're gonna survive. Don't think that you're not going to get there. Other than long. Patience is a huge thing to an extent, and that's what I brought up to you guys about like the Russian Nell in the Rob Lucci matchups, or when you're trying to play that swing for face game. But patience is mostly key because you're all playing the starve game with this deck. You're going the long haul. You're not going to get done in 10 to 20 minutes. You're going to probably get done in 25 to 30, depending on how fast you and your opponent play. And you've got to establish a board to kill them over 2 to 3 turns is kind of where I would say that. You are trying to do exactly what Colin brought up for the Gecko players. Like, you are trying to establish 2 to 3 bodies, 3 to 4 bodies to kill them across 2 turns. You're trying to suffocate your opponent. That's the goal. And then the next best tip is like, the deck is a value deck at the end of the day, and every card needs to do something to the best extent it can. If it can grab 2 cards, make it grab 2 cards. If it can pop a card and swing, make it pop a card and swing. Like, do as much as you possibly can with this deck, because that's what the deck, it needs it to do. Again, it's about suffocating your opponent. If Gadatsu can pop and then swing in another body the following turn, that Gadatsu is a great value play. But do it. Don't just swing for face. It goes back to that other patience thing. Let's do her in tandem. Like, patience is key. Remember, everybody, every card needs to do more than just one thing at a time, hopefully.
Yeah, don't play desperate unless you're like literally about to die on the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I said about the power level of Enel is that like every card in your deck is just above rate in the sense that every card is potentially 2 for 1. Like, Adatsu gets a free card, Luffy gets a free card, all of your top end gets a free card in a way.
This slide is it's just going over the situations that you're in with versus Starve versus Aggro. Our key notes on it is like, on the Starve side of thing is establish a game plan of the end board you desire. When you're going into a game and you have a matchup, like the reason I state that is like because like Katakuri is important in the Bonnie matchup. Katakuri is not necessarily important in every matchup, and neither is like having Ace. Ace is great, and it's great for every matchup. I'm not going to deny that, but you can still kill your opponent with, if you need to, with Katakuris and Yamatos. Don't get greedy if your hand is 2 Yamatos and a Katakuri. Don't get greedy. Please do not get greedy, because you can mulligan that and it's all 2Ks on the send back, and you're not going to love that hand anymore. Starve strategy goes to everything except for, like I stated, which was like against Rob Lucci when you have the Russian Els, and then the Moria matchup. Those are the 2 matchups I believe you cannot starve. Also blue being for the fact that you can deal with the 10-drop Kaidos with Raigo, but if you don't have those Raigos, what can you do? And you can't rely on those, right? Because they could have 4 Kaidos, because Kaido can draw Kaido. You are more than likely not going to have Raigo, because Raigo doesn't draw Raigo. That turns out, or the card would go crazy. I don't know if you have anything on that, Colin.
Yeah, blue likes, the Mono blue decks being Bo and Dofi, they like to play off of a low hand size anyway, so like starving them kind of just plays into what they're trying to do regardless, so just punch their face. The best thing to do is like, you want to make it not safe for them to play the Kaido, because you just go like, Raigo, punch you for 9, you know, put you down to 1 life, and then if I have a Yamato on board, then you might just die out of nowhere. So like, you need to create that kind of board state, which sometimes easier said than done, but that's the idea.
In another card, I didn't even, me and Colin were discussing this video and putting all this together, and I didn't even think about it. Also, the reason you put a hit strat is because pudding. You lose to pudding. It turns out when you.
Pudding's a bad card to run into.
So yeah, just hit them. Don't be afraid to.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit, but just work on depleting your opponent's resources. It's very key, and it's very, like, you don't realize it until you start doing it consistently as an Enel player, like how often you can deplete your opponent of resources. When you've got like 4 to 5 cards in hand and they're sitting on 1, nothing on board, you've got 2 to 3 bodies on board, you can do that consistently. You just have to be patient about it. Don't try to get cute with it and put them to 8 health and then swing once. That 1 card is a Gecko, right? Like, that is what can happen. And that puts them back in the game again. Like, just don't do it. It's not worth it. Play to your outs, and that's your major out. Tying into that is like knowing when to swing and how against your opponent. It's very hard for me to master personally, because I played red for all of my life. You didn't stop swinging. That was the goal. Hit, 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 hit. In this deck, it's establish 3 to 4 bodies like I discussed, and then try to kill your opponent over 2 to 3 turns. The best way to think about it is like, try to give them as little usage of that 10 Dawn as possible when you're trying to kill them, because that's how they answer. It's like, too many times that they have that 10 Dawn, they're able to answer your board, they're able to deal with you, they're able to swing at you. That's another thing that can happen, is you could just forget that you're also close to dying and just die out of nowhere. I don't know if you have anything on that.
Yeah, like, you also don't have infinite time, because if your opponent just like only swings at you with leader and they just like keep playing a body standing every turn, like, you will die to that unless you're a god and just have like all your Yamatos, right? Yeah. But when we're not in Magical Christmas Land, there is that skill in knowing when to like turn the corner on them after you starve them for 5 turns. It's not the easiest thing to articulate for every matchup, because it's, like we said at the top here, it is very matchup dependent. For something like Lucci, if you're starving them out, you turn the corner when they're clearly out of cards, but like, how do you know if they're out of cards? Or how do you know if they like are out of Morias? Sometimes you just have to place your bets, and that's comes with a lot of practice and a lot of like game sense and fundamentals. I wish I could give you like more specific points of like, all right, you need to check for factors A, B, and C, but it's really not that simple.
I think it's going to be the hardest thing that you learn on how, like, the hardest skill to learn on the deck is knowing when to swing out. I would love to get, again, comments, please let us know. If you guys play Enel and you have time on this deck, I want to know what are your guys' thoughts on this, because this is after playing the deck we play a lot. I promise you, when I say I play a lot, I'm playing at work. My 9 to 5, I am playing at work to make sure that I learn this deck and understand it.
Hopefully your workplace doesn't see this video.
But yeah, anyways, the next thing is aggro. I'm going to touch on this a little bit because there's so few matchups, but it's Russian Enel is the most important card for those, and it's not the most important, but it lets you just have a body that's just stays. It stays unless there's a Luffy on board. Don't play a Rocket Luffy when you have an Enel on board. I made that mistake once, guys. You'll regret it. I promise you. That Enel card says any Luffy on board, not just your opponents. Funny story about that. Arvin beat my ass in because I left the Luffy on board, and it ruined my day. I was actually at work. Sorry, tangent. Anyway, the other two cards that I really want to talk about in these aggro matchups is playing the Gadatsus and Luffys, and Sabo if you are running that card. 5 Dawn is very tricky, and 6k Power is very annoying for Law and the black decks to worry about. Lucci cannot kill a 5-drop without giving an extra card unless they've established 2 Brooks. I mean, but if they have 2 Brooks, I talked about it with Colin. If 2 Brooks lived, I don't know how else I don't know what you're doing. I really don't. Because you just played a Gadatsu, so I really don't know how 2 Brooks had lived on you. I don't.
Maybe you're just a bot at that point, I guess.
You are just a bot. That's the only way that I can see that happening. But yeah, anyways, play those cards on 5 Dawn, 6 Dawn, and then start playing Enels. Play Yamato's. Katakuri is a very controlled card. Yamato's aggressive. I know that sounds crazy because Yamato technically does the same thing as Katakuri does, but it's because of it being a 9-drop 9k that 1 point in each of those stats make a huge difference. If you only have Katakuri, play it, but Yamato is key.
It's less convenient. Like, just having one more cost like tagged on your body is just like that much more annoying to kill.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I've been tangenting too much though. Colin, please take it away. If you have any other point, I don't know how else to talk about Enel other than just it's a knowledge check deck. I get a lot of people on Twitter and stuff talk about like if you lose to this deck, you're a bot. But top end players are losing to this. Our national champion was a Enel player. We have to remember that, guys. He got there playing Enel. So I don't think that this is just a pure knowledge check deck and that takes no skill. I want that to be also clear. Like, it just doesn't take no skill to this. Colin, you have anything else to say? Because other than like, it's like general tips, right? It's just like be patient, go wide.
Yeah.
It's like, what else do we talk about with the deck?
Yeah, like if you're against an Enel, it comes to the same token. Be patient, right? Yep. Don't give Enel the extra card if you can help it, because guess what? They're gonna have more cards to counter with when you need to swing into one of their bodies, and that's kind of the fact of the matter is that you want to be in a position where you can run over their bodies in combat. If you're not playing Lucci, where you can easily kill their stuff through card effects, which actually even Lucci, doesn't do that as easily as like Sakazuki did back in the day, in the sense that like you don't have like an infinite amount of removal in your deck.
Yeah.
Compared to, or at least you won't get to it as consistently, especially now that Enel has even more top end. It's like when they're spamming like 9 drops and 10 drops every turn, it's like, are you really going to have enough removal for that? So you need to be able to kill some stuff in combat, which that's why you don't want to swing at life too early, because then they'll have more cards, therefore more options to work with. Even just like protecting their Gadatsus or their Rocket Luffys that are sideways is like a thing you don't want to happen, because then they might just run you over.
No, absolutely.
And again, it's like a lot of the same things that a lot of other content creators will tell you, or that you probably noticed in your games in previous formats. Go wide as wide as possible. You don't need to swing super tall. Just 5s and 6Ks is fine, but you need to be presenting as many swings in a turn as possible. That's how you get the most counter out of Enel. And yeah, context is key, right? It depends on the matchup, depends on the game, the deck you're playing, like we've been saying earlier.
Funny enough, it's like when you're playing against Enel, technically you're both playing the same strategy. Usually it's like both of you are playing enough bodies to like kill each other again across 1 to 2 turns. That's just how that game is played.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Enel is like a deck that forces both you and the opponent to play into sort of like battle cruiser style, where like both of you just try to play as many big bodies as possible. But that's like the advantage that Enel has, is that he's just naturally playing more top end, so his bodies are just gonna be bigger at the end game.
And also, like, as much as like the black cards combo with each other, like it turns out like it is funny, but like Gadatsu combos really well with Katakuri, or even like if they're playing the starve strategy, Yamatos are now playing a very effective pop game. Like it's an amazing feeling to pop an Isho with a 9-drop Yamato. That, oof, man, what a feeling.
Yeah.
And that can happen because you both are trying to play the starve game. Because I guess, and they can win off this. I'm not gonna say that they can, but like most people are not gonna hit you. But if they do, be understood that like you could lose because you could brick. And you have to be wary of that. That's another thing that happens with this deck, is sometimes you can just brick.
Yeah.
other than that thing, Colin, you have any other closing thoughts on this video? Because I think that like
Yeah,
nails it now.
like I said before, don't sleep on this deck. Yeah, other than that, like again, if you definitely practice with and against this deck, this is a very good deck this meta. Don't sleep on it. That's pretty much my final thought on it. But yeah, guys, if you like content like this, be sure to let us know in the comments. We love to hear you guys' thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe, and click the notification bell for more. And we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.